Live stream's good.
Hi, Jackie.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Concordia University's Fourth Space. Thank you for joining us for today's event, The Rise of Local Philanthropy, a film screening and a conversation. Now, to help situate you, we are streaming to YouTube, live from Fourth Space, and we are located on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. In the Fourth Space, we work with our university community to help mobilize knowledge. We co-create daily activities that examine research questions, projects, things in development across the university. Running today's event is a live stream Zoom meeting also, so we welcome any comments or questions with a raised hand via the chat if you're joining us by Zoom. And those of you here in the space, if you'd like to participate, just let us know, raise your hand, and we'll get a microphone over to you. Okay, and with that, it's my pleasure to pass the microphone over to communications professional, documentary filmmaker, journalist, and podcaster. Welcome back, Josie Fomé.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining me for this Montreal screening of my documentary titled The Rise of Local Philanthropy. I'm so excited to have with me virtually Jackie Asiimwe, who you may see in the documentary. Okay, spoiler alert, you will see her in the documentary. As well as my good friend here, Adele, who will be the moderator for the event. Without any further ado, or actually a quick housekeeping. So there are some snacks on the table there for those who are presently here. Help yourself at any point to munching, because you're watching a movie, you want to have some nice snacks and whatnot. So now, without further ado, I hope you enjoy. Amazing. Oh my goodness. Every time I rewatch that, I kick myself a little bit because it took me so long to get this in front of the public's eyes because I was overly self-critical of it. And I was like, who would want to watch this? And then I'm like, oh, a lot of people want to watch this and should watch this because the message itself is just so deep. But we're going to talk about it, okay? Hi, Hiriel, thanks for coming. All right, so now we're going to just switch into conversation. I want to invite the audience into this conversation, but I also want to invite Jackie into this conversation. So I met Jackie when I went to Uganda to work on this documentary. And I'm sure y'all saw her in the film. And so, Jackie, I want to just leave you some space to talk a bit about, who you are and what you do. Let's start off with, what is CivSource? What does CivSource do?
Hi, good evening. It's evening, sorry, in Uganda. What time is it there? Good morning, I think.
It's a little after 1 p.m.
A little after 1 p.m. Okay. So CivSource Africa is a philanthropy support organization. What does that mean? We are in the space between civil society and philanthropy, ensuring that those two are talking to each other. But we are also in the space where we are shining a spotlight on what local giving, local philanthropy looks like. Because like I said in the movie, for a long time, our indigenous ways of giving, of generosity and philanthropy have not been seen, have been invisibilized, have been deemed less than. But as Josie, you so beautifully show, it happens all day, every day. And that's the narrative that we want to shift and change and show that we come together in many beautiful and amazing ways. And so CivSource is also a chronicler of those stories, whether through our podcast called Community or the reports that we did, giving reports, which tell stories of individuals, communities, businesses, just people giving to all kinds of causes. And we also do an annual gathering of givers. And again, that's to bring together givers from all corners. Because when you're giving and giving alone, it can feel very lonely.
Yeah.
But in collectivizing, in showing in the room, in the space that no, you're many of you all doing amazing things. Those are the things that we, come in to say, come see how we do it. And we do it in beautiful ways.
Yeah. Oh, so that it sounds like y'all are quite busy, but from what I saw when I was working on this, it's there's so much happening, and we need more places like CivSource that are documenting it, that are gathering the data and sharing it, distributing it, that are telling these stories. But where would you say local philanthropy stands now? You can speak for Uganda specifically.
Huh.
Post-COVID, right? Since I believe this was
Post-COVID.
filmed in 2022, and
Yeah.
we're having this conversation. Since then, where would you say local philanthropy stands now in from what you've seen?
I think, like I said, it's still happening. And we all know that we are feeling the global economic crunch. But even in that crunch, people still give because one of the things we do highlight is that giving happens in three ways, or three ways that we try to document: time, treasure, talent. Because I think that's the other thing that has happened. The narrative has focused more on treasure, i.e., money. And therefore, when we center money,
Yeah.
we also don't see the many other ways that people give.
Right.
And moreover, when we center money, it's the big money, right? The many zeros after that one or that number. But here we're saying it doesn't even take that much money to be there for a neighbor. Sometimes showing up means I go with you to the hospital, or I stand with you and interpret for you in court because you don't understand the language in court. Or
Right.
it's just to show that so for me, when I say that it's still happening, it is because when you look at time, treasure, talent, all those three and many more, it's still going on all day, every day. The issue for us then becomes, how do we make it a national conversation, and how do we incentivize all the ways of giving? Because often also what is incentivized is money and
Right.
not the various other ways that people give.
Right. In the process of trying to make this a national conversation, I'm curious to know, in your opinion, do you think that this is something that's only happening in the global South?
No, to give is human. Absolutely. To give is human.
Yeah.
And the issue, though, is that it looks different for different people.
Right.
And when we say that we're also elevating the way Africa gives, the way Black people give, the way minorities give, minority communities, minority peoples, it's to say that, like I said, on that giving table, also,
Yeah.
only certain ways are highlighted, are celebrated. And what we miss is then the richness of the diversity of the ways generosity happens. Diasporas give. I mean, it's so many children give. It's
Yeah.
no respect of age, of economic status, of to give is absolutely human. And so I think when we see it that way, then we're actually seeing ourselves. It's a way, a path to justice. Because what is justice if it isn't seeing the other human, the human in you, so that
Right.
I can dignify you, so that I can celebrate with you, eat with you, commune with you, and work together to make this world a better place.
Yeah. It makes me think of one of the, can I say, traditions that we have here in Montreal is it June 1st or July 1st? When's our moving day? July 1st. Is that Canada Day? Yes, it's because it's Canada Day in Quebec. So one of our traditions here in Montreal, typically on July 1st, but usually whenever someone is moving, is that they'll gather their community. Whoever can come will come and help in whichever way they can,
Wow.
whether it's, helping to pack things up, whether it's moving stuff from the former location to the truck to the new location, what have you, whether it's maybe cleaning up the new space before moving the furniture in. And then at the end of the day, or at the end of all of that, they usually gather around on the floor because the couches aren't there yet and whatnot,
Yes,
and have
yes.
pizza. And I think
Wow.
that's one of my favorite things because first of all, you have your community around you, right? So
Yes.
you're not feeling a type of way. You feel safe, you feel secure, you feel like, I've welcomed you into my space and I feel comfortable being, having kind of like being bare with you. And we can also just enjoy each other's company and something as simple as just sharing pizza, to extend my gratitude for the assistance that you have offered and that you have given. I feel like that's a great reflection of the generosity and the giving that happens here in Montreal specifically, actually. Can y'all relate? Have you experienced that? Have y'all extended that giving to some friends?
Yeah, for me, I think it's just sitting on the floor. That's like the best part of it. It's
Right.
like I'm showing you as bare as bones as I can be.
Yeah.
Like, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful experience.
Yeah, and then being like everyone's talking about, oh my goodness, the boxes are so heavy, I'm so sore, but everyone is happy. That makes me think, what would you say to young people who don't believe they can participate in philanthropy? Because philanthropy, first of all, it's a big word, right? And when you think about it, the connotations that it has had for so long, for me anyways, let me speak for myself. When I used to think about it, I would think old white man, or I think, large foundation, right? So what would you say to young people who are like, philanthropy, I'm not there yet. I'm still stacking my coins.
It's interesting that you asked that because this year, the Gathering of Givers is for young people, about young people to
Oh, I love
celebrate the
that.
ways that young people are giving. And you're not in
Amazing.
Uganda to celebrate with
I
us.
know. Y'all should have pushed it up.
And so the theme is our generous spirit.
Wow.
And I just just before we came on this show, I sent around a flyer. Esther, one of the people that you show in the movie, is
Right.
doing a birthday fundraiser
Wow.
for 4040. And that's, that's the way our young people are doing car washes,
Yeah.
because in our part of the world, health is very expensive for a
Mhm.
certain category of people. So when it's car washes, when it is five-a-side, sports, and that's the way young people are getting involved.
Right.
Um, Young people are absolutely involved in child empowerment, in menstrual
Yeah.
health and hygiene. They are involved in so many ways, like, the moving that you've just in taking care of the elderly.
Yeah.
Young people are absolutely pivotal to that place and space.
Mhm.
Taking care of each other, just being there for each other,
Yeah.
whether it is to stop bullying at school, whether it is to make schools a safe space for everybody. I mean, young people, oh my goodness, nobody should think they're not a giver. And part of the reason we also use that word philanthropy is to take it back for ourselves. And I think that's what social justice does, is to reimagine ourselves in the word. Sometimes it's to create different words, but it's also to take back the power when others are taking the power from us, is to say,
Yeah.
no, we stand in with for that word, and we are philanthropists because philanthropy is love of humanity, and young
Mm.
people love on humanity. It's many of the climate justice activists are young people.
That's
Young
true.
people are calling us out all across this world to say you're not taking care of the earth. That
Yeah.
for me is part of the philanthropy of young people.
Well, I hope y'all are encouraged, okay? You don't have to wait until, you've done your 20 years at your corporate office. You can engage in philanthropy today. As we mentioned, it's time and talent as well, and not always just finances. So, Jackie, tell us, what is next for philanthropy in Uganda, or in Kampala specifically, if you'd like?
Wow. So several things. One is, that the collectivizing, bringing together people that are giving, so that we sort of create, I want to call it a movement, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think we all sort of give in our silos in our different corners, but when we come together, I think we can move the needle even much further. So there's that. Then
Yeah.
there's the whole area that Twasima was talking about, just
Mm.
challenging the ways in which, especially unfortunately, Western development has harmed our ways of giving and
Right.
doing community. So calling that out and even conceiving, reimagining, and CivSource does a lot of those conversations. How can we reimagine aid to
Yeah.
take away the pain of proving yourself, of contorting yourself into something you're not in order to get money just to help your community. So
Yeah.
we are, doing those conversations. But then even locally, we're also in conversation with our government to say, what does it look like to create an enabling policy framework for generosity to even become much bigger? What
Right.
are the laws that we need to write? What are the laws that, what are the ways that we need to reduce tax?
Mm-hmm.
If you remember the Gen Z riots in
Yeah.
Kenya, they were about
Kenya.
that already we don't have enough. So if you tax it, then we can't give. So
Yeah.
it's having those kinds of conversation, policy conversations, gathering givers, continuing the data and telling the stories, but also pushing back where global philanthropy seems to be counter to what the locals would like.
Yeah, it's clear that this is a layered conversation and it's like there's so many different steps at different intervals that are needed and necessary and different players at those levels to partake and to participate to get to where we need to be. And I, as a storyteller, I definitely encourage, young Ugandans, older Ugandans, all Ugandans, those who can, those who are curious, to continue to tell those stories and amplify the work that's being done, because it's not the only way, but it's one way that we can get the message out there that, first of all, giving is happening. It may not look like the way you thought it, or maybe you've never thought about it and didn't realize you were giving, right? Or second, if we're not having this conversation, why aren't we? And maybe we should. Let's start the conversation. I love that. So we're going to transition. Thank you so much, Jackie. We're going to transition into a conversation between Idel and myself, and then we'll open it up to the audience to ask both Jackie and myself questions if y'all have.
Okay. So Josie,
Hi.
great documentary.
Thank you.
We've been talking about local philanthropy, but now I want to know, what does local philanthropy mean to you in particular?
Oh my goodness. That's a loaded question. Honestly, when I went into this working on this documentary, I did not think it was going to end up a story about local philanthropy or community giving. And now that I've gone through it and I've done that work and I've engaged the people and I've had the conversations, local philanthropy looks like similar to the story I just shared about what happens here in Montreal when people are moving, right? It's people offering their time. It's people making themselves available in a myriad of ways, right? It's people saying, I know you're down and out, let me spot you this amount so that you can make it to your next paycheck, right? Or even reaching out to particular organizations for causes that they care about and giving whatever they can, volunteering. Local philanthropy, similar to what Jackie said, is just so varied. And that became very clear to me when I was working on this.
Thank you. So then why philanthropy? Why tell that story of philanthropy? Why not something else? For those of you who don't know, Josie basically lives in Uganda. She could have told a story about anything. So why philanthropy?
Yeah, so I think the story found me originally when I was thinking about what to focus on during this documentary. I came across, I don't know if y'all recall, there was the founder of No White Saviors, Olivia, who was talking about, who was sharing her bit in terms of how international aid and international development has kind of failed a lot of people in the global south with their methods and their ways, right? So I kind of wanted to amplify that. I wanted to talk about what No White Saviors is doing and how they're not only talking about or calling out these organizations, but they're also calling people in by educating them or giving them the means to educate themselves, so that it's not to say you can't engage in international aid or you can't engage in international development, but rather do it the right way. Do it in an ethical way, if that's even possible. But as I was speaking to people and as I was kind of like going around, for all the creatives out there, they'll resonate with me. A lot of times, the story comes and finds you. You have this one idea, and by the end of it, the idea has morphed into something completely different. It's still very beautiful, but it's not necessarily what you had first envisioned when you were brainstorming, right? So from the ideation portion to the final product, that's how the story of philanthropy came to be. And I think that's the story that needed to be told. So I'm very proud of it.
Okay. And just tying into what you said about like no white saviors and the work that they do.
Yeah.
Do you think local philanthropy and international aid can exist simultaneously?
Oh man. I think so. I think it hasn't. I think they have been very much compartmentalized because one has bullied the other, if I can say that word. Let me be mindful of my words, actually. But one has just had, more space and more attention for so long, partly because they've also been doing it wrong for so long, whereas the other one maybe hasn't been amplified enough over the years, over the decades, right? But as the documentary shows, these conversations are happening. And if we can move local philanthropy and the way that it's showing up through different people in different communities, if we can move it up to the table a bit more where it's like, oh, okay, you're giving in this way, this person gave in this way, and this person is giving in this way, and this way is local philanthropy. Everyone is a part of that conversation, right? But I do believe it's gonna take time, and we're gonna need everyone at that table. So people are benefiting from international development and international aid, right? And I'm hard pressed to say that they'd be willing to just kind of let go of those benefits and those privileges to be like, okay, well, what are y'all saying? You're saying I should take like a lower rank or less of a spot so you can have a bit more. Maybe we need to revisit that, but I don't think it's impossible. Yeah.
And just touching on international aid and international development, what gaps do you think exist in that?
Well, I think it's a matter of who is being listened to. First of all, who's speaking? Who has the loudest voice, right? And then who's being listened to? There are major gaps there, because what happens is, and what happened during COVID, which sparked this idea for me, is I was seeing how all of these staff workers of these big organizations, they didn't feel safe in Kampala, in Uganda, and I'm sure in other countries in Africa and in the global South in general. And so because of that, they were like, let me just go home. And their homes were places like Germany or Italy, or they were going somewhere in Europe, which we all know was a hot spot for COVID, right? So if you don't feel safe in a country that has barely any people who are dealing or suffering from COVID or even dying from it, but you're going to where it's happening right now, where people are dying every day by the thousands, is it really the fact that you don't feel safe? That's the question that I was asking myself as I was reading those articles, right? So if we're tasking those organizations to come, in fact, they're even tasking themselves, and they're saying, we're here to help you. But in the moment of the community's greatest need, you run away. Something's not working here, because now there's a huge gap. And we saw that it was community members who filled that gap by showing up for each other. Yeah.
I think like what you're saying is 100% true, because like when we're studying public policy, they always say it's also whose voice is not being heard, who is not sitting at the table.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, perfect. My next question is, who was the audience for your documentary?
Oh my goodness.
Who did you have in mind would sit down, watch, enjoy, and get something from it?
Yeah. When I think about the audience, it's such a difficult question for me because I want to say everyone, but apparently you can't say that. You have to have a target audience in mind. But when I consider this work, there are 2 to 3 different types of audiences that I would want them to watch this and engage with. First and foremost, to Jackie's point, where it's kind of letting people within the communities who are already doing the work or in those spaces who don't recognize that their giving is actually philanthropy, can be considered philanthropy, having those conversations with them and being like, what you are doing is so much, don't discount it, right? And then second, I would want to have these conversations with the larger organizations who aren't maybe listening as much and who have the louder voices, where it's like, okay, let's see how we can collaborate and work together with local communities who are doing the work and who have been saying for so long, what you're doing is not working. In fact, it's hindering us from being able to progress. And finally, I would include people who are interested in international development. So young people like myself, let's say, right? The reason why I even started going to Uganda was because of an internship that I was doing at a nonprofit. So it's not to say that you can't engage in international development or international aid. It's a matter of recognizing everything that you're coming with, all of your baggage, all of your privilege, and having those conversations prior to, embarking on a trip or collaborating on a project, and being like, before, to Jackie's point, before you are here and after you leave, we've been doing the work. So just be mindful of that.
Okay, great, thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience? Before I move on to the film questions that are like, I'm sure there's some film lovers out there who want to learn her process and everything, but we could take some audience questions now.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to maybe draw in on the talent, part of the talent treasure time. And in the context of like, is there still an outflow of kind of educated people from Uganda and specifically Kampala to some of the places you were mentioning to hopefully get jobs at international organizations? I'm just curious about that in terms of, we're thinking about international aid coming in, but what about kind of the outflow in terms of talent? And thanks for bringing up Jackie on the screen. This question is obviously for Josie or Jackie. Just kind of, I wanted to know if, what's the context there? I just don't know.
Are you asking if there are a lot of locals who are leaving
and if
Uganda?
And I'm not expecting you to have numbers available, but also just culturally, like, is there a pressure or a strong desire from young educated people to leave?
Yeah, like the brain drain, right? I can't speak much to it. I might have to pass this one over to you, Jackie. If you can speak to if there are people, the results of people needing to leave because, let's say, structures aren't in place to ensure their like utmost success, and so they have to go find that elsewhere. And as a result, we see a lot of talented, qualified people who aren't able to kind of like build back or give back to their country. But I will say, I feel like they give back in different ways. Jackie, you mentioned the diaspora, and that is one of the biggest ways that people who, for whatever reason, have had to leave their home country and they're now elsewhere, but they're always connected because, maybe you've left family behind or what have you. And so you're always, first of all, we're always in conversation, even with the time difference. And then you're always giving. You're always giving. Jackie?
Yeah, exactly as you've said. The two airports that I fly out most from is Entebbe in Uganda and Jomo Kenyatta in Nairobi. And what breaks my heart are young people leaving, mostly to the Middle East, not so much Europe and North America because the restrictions, traveling while black, but and that's a whole other movie to
That's
do,
a
right?
whole other conversation. We can get into it.
I heard you, Josie. That's a whole other conversation. But anyhow, sadly that there are, young people are leaving, and why? Because sometimes of the pressure to give. Part of the giving that we do, and I don't know if it resonates with communities outside of Africa, but just while giving is absolutely beautifully something you do because you want to, there's also a level of obligation.
Yeah.
There's almost a you have to. And especially when your parents, your guardians, your elders have broken their backs to educate you, it's almost, they don't even have to tell you that they're now passing the buck on to the next generation to look after the next generation as well as them. And so there is that pressure to give. And so for our economies that are small and yet stretched, young people are having to leave. Why? To send back money to a sick parent, to a sibling that is still going to school, to whatever it is that they're sending back money for. So they're not even leaving because they want to. It is because, in a sense, there's an obligatory side of giving, which sometimes is called black tax. And that's the conversation that indeed they want to have at this gathering of givers, because the young people are starting to say, what is this pressure about? It's also killing us. Talk about mental health challenges, talk about the suicide rates among young people. Some of it is just that pressure that they feel like they can't talk about it. It's an obligation. You're deemed unfit if you can't look, not just after yourself. Don't look after yourself, but at least look after someone else in the family, right?
Right,
And
right.
so, what are the support mechanisms when there are no jobs in country for young people? So yeah, and I think it is a justice issue and a dignity issue, and we do have to talk about it.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jackie. But yeah, I think it's a really good point that you raised there, Alex, because though once we leave, we do give back, it comes back to financially, and this aspect of talent is still missing. So I don't know if there's what the answer could be or if there's a solution. I think it's probably a mixed match of a lot of different things coming together to ensure that people don't have to leave, period. But yeah. Jackie, while you were speaking, Idel's, my moderator here, is from Kenya, and the both of us were like, yes,
Black tax, heavy on black tax. If any other questions?
All right.
No, okay, that's fine. We'll move over to more film-related questions.
All right.
So what's your filming process like? Let's start there.
Oh my goodness. My process for this doc. So first of all, it all started in 2020, as all good stories begin. And I received a grant to work on this, actually. It was called the Roving Reporter Bursary from a Canadian foundation here, speaking of foundations and grants and giving. And it wasn't until 2022 that I was able to go to Uganda and film this. And I was so naive. I was so idealistic in thinking, I'm gonna go, it's gonna take 2 months max, and I'm gonna film, I'm gonna be like solo dolo working on it by myself, independent Black woman who don't need we all know how that goes. Ask me why I spent, I think, close to 6 months there because of this project. Because once I got there, I realized that, first of all, there are creatives there already, and I do not need to do this alone. And not only do I not need to do it alone, I cannot do this alone, because I don't know if you noticed, but there was a portion in the documentary that wasn't in English. It was in the local language in Kampala called Luganda. And I don't speak Luganda as much as I like to pretend that I do. I don't speak it and I don't understand it. So on that base level of just being able to understand each other linguistically, I needed to get like my production assistant to assist with that. But my crew, finding the crew really helped move the project forward, because I was able to delegate and actually direct a bit more rather than trying to direct myself and get the work done. But thankfully, we were able to, once we got through like the filming process, the shooting days, now I moved into editing, and editing is the bane of my existence. But I'm glad it all came together. Editing took like about another 6 months, honestly. That I was working on it by myself, and I think that's probably why. When you work on projects like this, it's really important to give yourself deadlines, because as a creative, you're just gonna look at it and be like, I don't like that, and that keeps going until somebody tells you, submit it. Yeah. Right. But then once I finished it, I got my cinematographer, who's also a colorist, to color grade it. And that was that. Because once it's color graded, it's like,
all set.
Yeah, you can't make any more changes, or you shouldn't. Especially because these people that I was working with, I was already back in Montreal at the time. So it wasn't something as simple as, oh, I'm just going to go down the street and work with him. It was trying to make sure he's awake so I can call him so we can collaborate together. So it was a mixture of all that, but yeah, it took about like a year or so, I guess, finally. Mm-hmm.
And any technical difficulties filming?
Any technical difficulties? I think it's finding the people, because at first this subject seems a bit controversial, because I was like, what do you think about international aid and international development, and are you satisfied? So I guess it's a matter of also asking the questions in a way that won't maybe seem intimidating, and will seem a bit enticing for them to tell their truth without feeling like they'll lose their funding as well. Other than that, I think my crew really took care of all the technical aspects if ever we came across it. thankfully I didn't lose any equipment, none of that. So yeah, it was more or less smooth.
So if another creative was like, I want to make a documentary, what would you say is the time that it takes from start to finish? I know you said 6 months and another 6 months. Would you say a year?
It all depends on the project.
Okay.
It all depends on the project and the team. Yeah, it can vary. And the length of the work, it really varies.
But a minimum, like if someone was like, I want to do the same thing.
Okay, let's say, yeah, if someone wants to do maybe another 20-minute documentary like this in a different country, because I keep forgetting the fact that like this was internationally done, and yeah, it blows my mind. But let's go with a year.
Okay.
Listen,
Okay.
it really depends on yourself and your team, your discipline, your deadlines, all of these things. Because all of that was a bit loosey-goosey with me, it was a bit fluid. I think I lean into that fluidity. But if you're structured and rigid with like your deadlines and when you need things to get done, obviously sometimes the story is a story and it likes to have a mind of its own, but it can be done within a year or less. Sometimes some projects take longer, but that's what I would say, minimum.
Okay. And what was your favorite part of the whole process?
Oh my goodness. Engaging with the people. So I was noticing while I was rewatching that a lot of the film, other than Emma, a lot of the speakers were women, which is another conversation we can have about like women in philanthropy and what that looks like. But just being able to chat with these dope women who are doing great work, who are just so talented, who are so educated, and who are so passionate about their communities and engaging with members in their community and doing work to elevate their communities is just so cool to see. And obviously, I think this was my first time in Kampala for real, because typically I go to a different city.
Okay.
And I was liking it. It's fast paced. It's nice, kind of like Montreal-ish.
Okay. Okay. And just to conclude,
Yeah.
what's next for you? What should we expect?
Oh my
Another one?
goodness.
Nairobi based? No.
So I've actually worked already on my next documentary. It's called The Friendship Gap.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So in fact, the screening is coming up next September, well, next month, or like next month is what, in 2 days or so.
Yeah.
At the end of September, it's going to be screening at the Montreal Black Film Festival.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. So end of September, check it out. We're exploring what happens when somebody starts grieving a friendship breakup and how they seek or try to seek community through that grief. Yeah.
Okay. And then after that?
After that, I think I'll just keep a lookout for stories that I can tell and people to work with to bring those stories to life.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Josie.
Thank you, Adele.
Those are all the questions I have.
Okay.
And I want us to end on time as well.
Yes.
So, but thank you for this. Thank you
Thank
for all
you.
the work you do. It's
Thank you too.
instrumental, and I'm sure it's like changing a lot of lives. And if not, it's definitely a conversation starter or
Yes.
piece for a lot of people.
Thank you. And thank you, Jackie. Thank you so much for making the time. Jackie's currently in South Africa. So she's like, she's on a different time zone, and she took the time to come and chat with us. And I really, really appreciate it. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right. Thanks for coming. That's it, y'all. Bye. Thanks for everyone who joined online.
Yes, thank you, Josie, Adele, Jackie. Also, thanks everyone for joining us today here in ForSpace for this conversation. Those of you online, also, we will be closing up the Zoom and the live stream now, but just a reminder, this conversation remains available on our YouTube channel if you'd like to revisit or share it there. And I wish you all a fantastic long weekend. Okay, bye.